So then the mother started taking all of us out to dinner, schmoozing us, and then came right out and said, look, there's been some terrible allegations against my son. I just want to make sure that you're good with our family. And I told her that I was molested by your son at that dinner. And she looked straight at me and she goes, well, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm sure that he's not doing it to Melissa.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, a free safe space for people to share and learn from others' experiences with mental health and addictions. I'm your host, Todd Runnebaum, suicide attempt survivor and a recovering substance abuser. Well, I'm very happy to say I have another amazing episode here. I'm speaking with an incredible lady she's incredible for so many reasons, and her name is Michelle Tennant. She is a publicist, and she works in PR. She also writes a blog or a column for Psychology Today called Mental Injury is Not Mental Illness. And we talk a little bit about all this stuff, but mostly we talk about how as a child she was SA'd or sexually abused by a predator in her neighborhood close to her family, and how at 18 years old she put that mofo in jail. She's fascinating, she's a great talker, and she has lots of great advice and wisdom, especially around mental health and PTSD, CPTSD. So we kind of go back and forth between her story and treatments and things, and then we go back to the story, and then we go back to talking about modalities and all types of stuff. So she's really, really great, and it's actually going to be covered over 2 episodes because she was just so fascinating, and I guarantee you're going to like the second episode just as much as you like the first. So make sure to listen to both of them. Be sure to check the show notes and follow all her links and things I put in there, her social medias and everything she's up to. And please make sure to rate and review the podcast. I got a very lovely review the other day. Maybe I'll read that after the episode. And if you want to watch this episode, it will be on YouTube, so you can check out Bunny Hugs Mental Health on YouTube as well. And of course, I've got all the other links in the show notes for merch or buying coffee and all that stuff, my social medias, so you can check those out too. But for now, without further ado, I give you Michelle Tennant, M.A.
My name is Michelle Tennant. I'm 55 years old. But when I was 8, I was, for the very first time, sexually assaulted by a neighbor who was 20 years my senior. He was my mother's best friend's son. And, somebody that was really in the family. Like I saw him truly as an uncle, somebody that I really, really trusted. Long story short, when I turned 18, I contacted the authorities myself. I started when I was 17, actually, away from my parents knowing that I was doing this. My father was a military vet from the Korean War. My mother was German, so they both had been very traumatized by war environments and had anger issues and PTSD issues of their own. So I didn't really call upon them. I knew as a young child I would need to do it on my own. And I put him in jail when I was 18. So,
wow.
All the drama of a private investigator coming after me and, all that stuff. Like, it was hardcore for an 18-year-old, right?
So he hired an investigator to make you look like, what do they call it? Like victim blaming, make the victim look like
all
gaslighting and all that stuff.
All that stuff, right? I had mics on me. I could get into whatever area of the story that you want me to drill down into.
For sure. Okay.
One of the things that I'm most committed to in a conversation that when we do talk about mental health is that complex PTSD is not very understood as a mental injury separate from mental illness. So as I've done, I have a master's degree in human development. I've been doing international PR now for 35 years. And so I get the luxury of representing doctors who really study this. And I have the ability to then talk about it with our magazines and our TV producers. And so I'm blessed that way that I get to continue to learn about my mental injury. And it's basically when you're traumatized like that as a kid, let me just tell everybody who's listening, it's like a scar. It's like a scar on your leg. Like you get hurt, on a bike when you're a kid and you got a scar there on your knee for the rest of your life. It's the same thing in our brains. And typically complex PTSD, at least for me and my brain, because I had some I had some brain work done, like as in they were like looking at my brain and like, well, how did it actually develop and what's happening to your brain? So I have some scar tissue specifically in the area of self-care. So I have to, as we learn about ourselves, it's empowering, right? So if you do have a mental illness, if you do have a mental injury, whatever you have, to learn about it is empowering so that you can provide yourself the things that you need in your life. And so one of the things that I do now, middle-aged, how we just like, hey, I want to teach everybody else about what I've learned. So I've been writing over at Psychology Today in a blog called Mental Injury is Not Mental Illness. And as I turn to my golden years, Todd, I'm going to continue to write and educate people about a trauma-informed in society. So this is one of my greatest pleasures in life, to talk about all my experiences. So what questions do you have?
That was it. No, I'm kidding. Okay. So that's
awesome.
That's it in a nutshell. So now, I'll dive a little deeper here.
Sure.
Actually, whereabouts did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb called Valley Station. It's about 20 miles from Fort Knox, Kentucky. Oh. And about, 10 or so miles from downtown Louisville. So Derby City, right?
Louisville.
And, you're in the South when they give you sweet tea that's already sweetened. But in Louisville, there's some Yankee influence up there in Louisville because we serve our tea and you got to sweeten it yourself. So that's how you're right there on the Mason-Dixon line, right?
Well, I'm not sure if you know, but I'm in Canada.
Are you really?
I am, but I
Hi,
know
Canadians.
Well, most of my audience is actually Americans.
Hi, Americans.
So you grew up in Kentucky. This person, they started around. You were around 8 years old. His
name is Larry. You can talk about it. He's dead. Oh. His name is Larry.
Oh, I was going to say hi, Larry, but never mind.
No, he's my perpetrator, Larry. Probably traumatized himself. The private detectives told me that his mother was his perpetrator. So the grandmother figure in our family. Because I didn't have a grandmother. She was our next door neighbor and always presented herself as a grandmother figure. So I have a lot of issues with two-faced people. As you can well imagine, right? Like if the minute you show to me that you're two-faced, I can't even really be in a conversation with you without thinking about that. Like, am I getting the straight scoop or which face do I have? So it's because of that, right? So I look, as soon as somebody shows to me that they're two-faced, I typically limit my time with them.
You either limit your time or, for me, I also just I accept that that's how they are, and I'm only going to give them so much information because quite often people like that are information mining so that they can use it against you later or to whatever to spread it. So it's like, it's on my terms. I give you what I feel like giving you, but let me just add though. Let's keep it in the higher. When we're talking about mental health, we have to remember, because people are not informed about what trauma does to people. So when somebody is acting like that, it's probably because they've been traumatized themselves. So we look at this dynamic from my perpetrator. His mother was abusing him, according to the private detective who helped me. Thank you, Dr. Carrie. Detective Carrie Duncan out there in the world somewhere. I think he's retired now. Just one of those epitome of the white and shining armor cops. From my memory as an 18-year-old, just like he was golden. He's like, we're going to get these bad guys, Michelle. We're going to get them, And it was just like, people will come to help you when you're ready, when you're ready. Not every victim gets to bring their perpetrator to justice. I'm the lucky few, So, but the point is that to have compassion even for the perpetrator. I know that's distasteful for people, especially people who are beginning their journey. But we have to remember that as humans, in the mind of that perpetrator, they're doing no wrong. Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's extremely difficult. I saw something that said forgiving your, not just perpetrator or who, because it's not always a perpetrator, but whoever did you wrong is actually self-care for you.
Yes. Yeah, because you keep drinking the poison if you don't.
Right? That resentment, that hate.
If you don't get if you don't get the forgiveness in there, then you keep reliving the pain, and that's poison. It's literally a chemical reaction in your body when you're you're overdosing on cortisol and stress. And it causes all kinds of issues for the body and the brain. So it is an act of self-care, and it's not always easy. I recognize that.
Oh God, yeah, I can imagine. Was it easier to forgive him because he went to jail?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So it's like you get a little best of both.
It's funny. I have a beautiful husband. We've been married for 20 years. So I have a beautiful career, a lovely life. I have hobbies: whitewater kayaking, mountain biking, a beautiful career. I say all that not to brag, but to let people know that there is hope in your life if you work at the therapy, the EMDR, the neurofeedback, the personal development courses. I've just been at it since I've been 18, right? I don't think it'll ever end. I think I get triggered again in a situation, then I go back to my therapist. So, or my husband, who's my confidant, and he's, I'm very big personality, right? I've always been that way. If you look at, I was looking at pictures of myself when I was 5. I was the dairy princess of Jefferson County.
Fantastic.
I literally was the little girl with the ribbons who would give it to the kids who had the big cows. Right?
That's fantastic. I love it.
And so I was like, a really big personality. My mom and dad probably could have put me in TV and made some money off of me, but they weren't. Dad was a military nurse, and he met mom at another hospital. She was a nurse too, and they just wanted to have kids. That was like the epitome of, and they were very religious. That was all they wanted in life, right? Is to have kids. So my, this bigness, this personality, I think that if we look at who we are, and then if we have a spouse or we have a relationship, it grounds us, right? So my husband always reminds me of people.
I can attest to that.
Right? Like,
sorry.
Is this really he's my sounding board, in other words. And if he gets tired of a particular topic in my life, like right now, I have a charity project that's particularly noisy in my life from, people who love to gossip, and so that's hard sometimes. And so he's like, look, don't talk to me about it anymore. I usually just quit, right? And I'm like, oh, but I'm really committed. I'm really committed to this, So it's not always easy in life to kind of couple what you've been experienced, but I always remind people, look, the reason why that person is gossiping, the reason why that person is acting that way is they've been hurt. Hurt people hurt. And if we can rise above the personal attack and see that person just needs some compassion and support, especially those who really attack us, boy, then we'd have a different society, would we not?
Yes, but at the same time, you don't give two-faced people time. But that's just setting a boundary, too. You're protecting yourself from...
Oh, I'll give them time. I minimize
limited time, right.
Limited. We met on online dating, my husband and I. And then because we were successful online daters, other people were asking us, well, what do you recommend, right? I was like, well, I for sure recommend putting on your profiles your commitments, and your deal breakers, like clearly, so people can see, like, oh, am I that person or I'm not? But here's the big thing. In the first month of any relationship, everybody shows you who they are. Everybody shows you whether or not they can be trusted. We just are like, if we've really worked on ourselves, we're healthy, we know exactly what our mental injury or mental illness is and how to take care of ourselves. If we've got balance with that, we will walk away from people who might hurt us, or we might limit our time with those who are hurt us. Doesn't mean that we have to be nasty to them. Doesn't mean that we have to disparage them or do anything to hurt them. We just have to take care of ourselves. But a lot of people don't listen to that inner gut in that first month and then proceed with the relationship after that. And I think for those of us who have, that we really are living with trauma and we're living with like, because I do think that you can heal from it. I do think that you can be completely well adjusted. I just think it's important that we look at those red flags, and people will definitely show you who they are. You know what I mean? That's the point I wanted to make about looking at relationships and getting along with other people.
Well, again, that self-care is listening to your gut and like not thinking, oh, I can change them or what. I mean, usually it's because you're not fully emotionally, I don't want to say, emotionally mature, maybe. I don't know. You're not quite taking care of yourself yet if you're going into those relationships. Sometimes I think maybe.
For sure. 100%.
And then again, you get hurt because hurt people hurt other people.
And it doesn't, and then let's talk about complex PTSD, because a lot of people don't. It's one thing to have a single point of trauma in your life, like you were robbed one night, right? But you're an adult and then you're robbed. Like you've got the skill sets of an adult and you have the brain development of an adult to have the capacity to cope and adapt based on that trauma. For children who have adverse childhood experiences over a prolonged time, like me, from 8 to 18, it's important to know that takes time to heal from. And, it's like an onion layer, right? We always talk about this onion layer. As soon as you think that you're healed, then another onion layer reveals itself. And I used to get really frustrated about it, but then I had a sort of like a life coach through this program called Landmark. I don't know if you know it. It's landmarkworldwide.com. They have personal development courses where you can create your life. Okay. And my coach, I remember, because I was really like trying to create myself and do this thing. And she was the one person, because I was doing a leadership course there, and we had to write and do a speech on the person that most impacted your life. That's what they said, impacted your life. And so I was going to do my
good or bad necessarily.
They didn't qualify.
Right.
So I was going to do my perpetrator. And my coach's name was Taylor. Hi, Taylor. I'm going to send this to you later. And Taylor's like, girl, you cannot get up in front of 400 people and talk about your perpetrator. She's, girl, I got you. I got what you're trying to say, but we need to choose somebody else. And I was like, yeah, but this, it formed who I was as a child. It forms like this spidey sense in you, almost like this superpower of, I'm extra sensitive in a room. Like I actually have a gut reaction when, something happened in the pandemic, and there was a neighbor who kept like not honoring the pandemic rules. And my mom was, in her 80s and living with us, and I was fearful of her health in particular because she had a heart condition. So she would go out and just talk to that gentleman, and I would say, you don't need to talk to that gentleman, encourage him to come over here. We're in a pandemic and we need to be distancing ourselves from people, right? And she's like, oh, Michelle, don't be so distrusting. I'm like, I'm telling you, my spidey sense went off and you don't need to be talking to him. Well, sure enough, one Saturday morning, he's lurking in our backyard. Yeah, my husband took care of it. We do live in the South now. We live in Asheville, North Carolina, and my husband happens to be from Mississippi. So while he and I may disagree about gun control, he happened to be out in his shop cleaning his guns because he'd been doing some target practice. So that was a weird, that moment of like cleaning his gun, and then we had a guy lurking in our backyard. It was so creepy. And I said to my mother, I said, when are you gonna trust my spidey sense? So we can say whatever we want about our trauma, like it's good or bad, or the perpetrator is good or bad. But what if it's neither of those? It's none of that. It's just humans adapting to their environment. That's an interesting conversation.
Right. And then, there's a whole reason why our brains do that, because it's like, hey, I got bit by a wolf in whatever BC, and it's like, oh, okay, so now, it's a survival
totally
thing. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to go back again
Ask
we're
me
kind of all
anything.
over the place, but
Okay.
so he was your perpetrator for over 10 years.
Yes.
Did you ever tell your parents at that time, or was it like you said you didn't involve them when you were going after him, but was there any knowledge? Did you tell anyone or?
I did. I
Okay.
told my priest at the Catholic Church. I was a reader, an organ player, and I was at a parochial grade school, and we went to mass every day. So I was the organ player at our children's mass, or a reader, right? I was one of those standout students that the nuns just loved, right? And put me everywhere. So I thought, as a young child, I thought that it would be important to tell this in confession. I know everybody's like your heart is like sinking for a young girl, right? Because I was young, I was trying to figure out what was happening to me, and to make to have hard conversations right now with everybody. But I know I just mentioned my Mississippi husband has guns. Well, my perpetrator also used guns. So I was molested at the point of a gun.
Oh, yikes.
So
Okay.
I had to marry the man that I married, I had to really work through, can I actually be around the Southern approach around guns, which is, yeah, we're going to go hunting, you see?
Right.
So I did do my concealed carry weapons license, not really to carry. I don't really want to carry, but I want to be powerful around guns and not be freaked out and know when to, use them, not use them, and have a little more choice in the matter of guns, right? That's why I didn't tell my parents. My father also he kind of grew up in the Appalachian part of Ohio. So and he was a military man, so we had guns. He had a .22 rifle, and had said one point when we were watching.
That's hardly
TV,
a gun.
he's deceased now, and I think he might have a conversation with you about that.
No, I grew up with 22 rifles.
Right, the BB guns or whatever my brother had. Yeah, but he did. My father, I hadn't told them, and he stood up. We were watching like 60 Minutes or something when I was a kid with him. We were watching TV together, and he stood up really angry. He was a military guy. He had some anger issues of him from the Korean War, right?
Sure.
And he stood up and he said, if anybody touched my kids, I would end them with my .22 rifle. So I knew if I told my parents, my breadwinner of a father would kill my neighbor, you see, to make matters like super complicated for a child, right? So I thought, great, I'm going to church every day, and I'm getting catechism and spirituality development, and so why not tell my priest?
And at what age were you at that point?
Fourth grade. What are we in fourth grade? Not 10, maybe.
Okay,
Something
so it
like
had
that.
been a couple years of
Yes.
abuse already.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm trying, he told me to say a few Hail Marys and an Our Father. And that was it.
Did it work? It didn't work, apparently.
Didn't work. Well, maybe it did, because later it all came to pass that I was, at that point when I was 18, he had really progressed into child pornography, is what the detectives told me. Because I became of age, right? I became my own adult at the age of 18. So that's when I contacted the authorities. My mother was not really for me taking therapy, but I had a friend at school whose mother recommended a sliding scale therapy. Seven Hills or something like that, I think, is still existing in Louisville. So then, I was working, I was like working at the YMCA as a lifeguard, and I made my own money, but not much, right? And I was driving. So I got myself therapy, and my mom didn't quite really understand why. She's like, why do you need therapy, right? She thought made it about her. And I was like, I just need therapy, right? And because I didn't want to worry her. And that therapist at Seven Hills recommended that I call the authorities, because he still had children at home. And one of his things is my name's Michelle, but he would call me Melissa. And his daughter's name was Melissa. And I would babysit her on occasion, and I would bring from the library those books. the books about good touches, bad touches.
Mm-hmm.
And I would put all these books. I'd give her, like, when I would babysit her, I gave her like 20 different books to choose. And she would always choose that one. Read that one again, Michelle. Read that one again. Yeah. So I reported them. And then that kind of started a whole thing.
So you weren't the only one he was abusing, I take it.
Oh, no. He had a stepson that we were abused together. And so when I finally got how it came about, you want these details?
I mean, yeah.
It's fine.
I know I'm cringing at stuff, but it's cringe. It's
cringeworthy.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to listen to, but it's also reality for a lot of people, and that's kind of why I like these hard conversations.
Yeah, so everybody take a deep breath.
Yeah, people can
Turns
relate.
out he got put in jail. It's all good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he had a stepson that I won't mention his name so that we can still keep everybody anonymous. Melissa, Larry. That's all you really need to know, right? When later his wife discovered the abuse, and so
how old were you when she discovered?
This is when I'm an adult now. I'm 18. Okay.
Gotcha.
I started college. I came home from college. I went to Chicago to college. And then I came home one Christmas, and I was in the house, my parents' house, and there was a phone call from Detective Kerry Duncan, and this is exactly what he said. Hello, this is Detective Kerry Duncan from the Oldham County Police, and I'm investigating Larry, I won't say his last name, because, your house was the next door house to him, and there's been allegations by his wife that he is a sexual child predator, and I'm wondering if anybody in your house has been abused. Something to the effect of that is what that's his opening sentence. And I said, yes, me. And he was like, you can imagine, like you could hear, like he stood up, you could hear, he was like, I got one, right? And then I became an unnamed witness. So they didn't know who I was, right? But he was bringing in the divorce proceedings. The police were like, we have, somebody who has no motive, right?
Right.
At that point in the divorce proceedings, and they were trying to get, rights to the children. You know how nasty all that gets.
Yeah, yeah.
So the detective was trying to just check out these allegations, found me, and then that's what then, for the longest time, they didn't know who the victim was. So then the mother started.
Larry's wife?
Yeah, the grandmother.
Okay.
His mother, the one that lived next door, right? This was her son, the original perpetrator.
Right.
She started calling all of his victims. I know. It would be a good movie, wouldn't it? So to see who started taking all of us out to dinner, schmoozing us, and then came right out and said, look, there's been some terrible allegations against my son. I just want to make sure that you're good with our family.
So you got a supper out of it.
I got a supper out of it. And I told her that I was molested by your son at that dinner. And she looked straight at me and she goes, well, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm sure that he's not doing it to Melissa.
That's a weird thing.
That was her response. Yeah.
You're like, wow, okay.
Yeah. And I didn't say anything about working with the police or anything. And then she says, well, if you have any more issues, will you come straight to me?
Bunny Hugs and Mental Health is supported by Co-op. I've been a member of my local co-op, Sherwood Co-op, for about 20 years. If you live in Western Canada, especially the prairies, or spent any time here, you've probably fueled up or bought groceries at a co-op. You might even have a co-op number, or 2, or 3. You know if you know. But co-op is not just a gas bar or grocery store. Although co-op is those things too, it's a different kind of business. Co-op members are owners and success is shared with everyone. Your co-op doesn't benefit one person or one corporation. Your co-op was built for everyone. Your co-op was built for your community. Learn more about co-op and find a location near you at co-op.crs.
Introducing the timely children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. The visually stunning book is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Sometimes Daddy Cries is getting rave reviews from parents and mental health professionals alike. One critic has stated, "This is a timely and important book that will help countless fathers and sons broach the subject of depression." An Amazon customer commented, "An excellent book to open up a conversation with a young child about depression in a parent." Sometimes Daddy Cries is available in hardcover and paperback on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com.
I said something like, "I'll stay in communication with you." Okay.
At this point, did you know she was also a perp?
I didn't know that she was the original perpetrator. No.
Okay.
No. And then there was another son in the mix. And right when I was little, the family would give me gifts and we would always be over there playing and whatever. And I would do the little, because the other brother was super cute. My perpetrator was not, to be blunt. And, but I was like, you know how any 4 or 5-year-old, like, "Hi, I'm going to get married one day. Are you going to be my husband?" Like that type of innocence. And then he would always play like, "Yep, I'm going to wait for you, Michelle, right? And I'll be your husband." Like that kind of play.
And how old was he?
I don't know, 30, 35.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And if people do that kind of stuff now just innocently, right? Like just kind of playful, I can't be with it. Like, because I'm like, is he molesting her? Like that's like where I go immediately. Like when an older adult starts to act that way, I start to question. Not that there's anything wrong with that type of interplay, but I just don't like it because it was two-faced for me, right? It's like yuck. Okay. But she was the one that sent the private detective to Chicago to my dorm room. I'll never forget it.
The grandmother did.
Yeah. Because they were trying to figure out who the unnamed person was. And
They hired a private investigator to find out who was...
Yeah. Followed me to Chicago.
God. Bananas. Okay. Sorry.
It is bananas.
Keep going. I'm riveted.
Okay, I promise everybody I will get my memoir finished. It's like in its last... I have it all written out. I even got an editor that's gone through it, but I still haven't published it. But I will, and you'll be able to get it at... Right now, I do write quite a bit for Psychology Today at writethetrauma.org, but I promise you I will finish because I think it would make a good movie, right? It's like it would be a good movie.
Well, yeah. Well, now that especially because I know the ending.
You do know the right? Yeah. You're like, "Oh my God, this horrible stuff has happened," right? Yeah. Just on a brighter note, just like to lighten up, right? Take a breath. My niece, right? I'm very open about all of this, so I get calls from young people all the time, like, "This is happening to me. What should I do?" and that kind of stuff. It's fine.
Which is why I appreciate you being so candid and stuff. That's why I think we should talk about this stuff because it happens to people and people don't know what to do. And
100%.
Yeah.
And that's what my memoir really is about, Todd, is about silencing victims. Right? Because when you start to talk about this, people go, "I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear that negativity." You're like, well, that's what's happening behind closed doors. And my husband wants to remind me because somebody told me to shut up. It was at a reading of Eve Ensler's book, The Apology, talks about how her father abused her. And I was sharing my story at one of those book readings. It was in downtown Asheville. And one of the guys, the men in the group, at the end, he basically told me that I should not share it. And
like he was another panel person or something?
There were two therapist moderators. And it was the other one. Don't worry, the other one worked at a prison and set him straight after, right?
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, right. Like, don't do that to victims, right? And when we got home, I was like a little bit in shell shock that the guy was trying to silence me. And my husband gave me a hug and he said, "Babe, just because it's hard for society to hear doesn't mean you shouldn't say it."
Exactly. Probably all the more reason to say it.
Yes. And then the other thing is that when you listen to somebody who has complex PTSD share their story, they're seen. And then they can start to self-heal and make sense out of what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where the healing begins. It's when we keep suppressing these stories that are ugly to hear that they continue. Because we have to like really dig in, like, well, why is this happening in society? Why is this, right? So, yeah, so I'm in, actually it was a Saturday morning, back to Chicago, back to the drama of the story. I'm actually, a sophomore in college. I was studying theater. And I was in Chicago at DePaul University, and I would get up every Saturday morning, and I would go play volleyball. Do you know what volleyball is?
I've heard of it.
Okay,
it's volleyball against the wall?
Yeah, it's volleyball and racquetball combined.
Ah, gotcha.
So fun. So fun, right? Because you're playing off the wall. You got like 4 people on each side. I'd play every Saturday morning, and then we would go to Billy Goat Tavern. Do you know on Saturday Night Live, cheeseburger? Nope. And then you'd say, nope, no Coke, Pepsi. Do you remember that old skit? Yeah.
Yes.
That's the tavern where the SNL staff got it. And then they originally, because they usually, a lot of the SNL people come from Second City in Chicago, right? So we would just we'd play volleyball, and then we'd go,
get
cheeseburger, right? Coke, no Pepsi. Like, it was just like super fun in college to do that. And remember, we didn't have cell phones then. So my roommate in college, my dorm roommate, called the gym where we were and had me paged to come home. Because the private detective, he was drunk and had shown up at the dorm demanding to see me. Quality people.
A drunk private investigator.
Yeah.
Who's supposed to be sneaking around.
And he had the brown leather jacket, if you're thinking of like a stereotype of a drunk private detective, that's him.
Wow.
I love to look at, because I'm now, a theater, an actress. I also, that was in my my younger days. But now I just love to write. And so I love a character study, right?
Yeah.
And like, why do people dress that way? Why do they act that way? What's happening here? So yeah, I came home. Well, before I took the train home, I took the L home immediately, but I stopped, right? Because we didn't have phones. I stopped in at the security of the university where I was on campus and told security to contact the Chicago police, and then also alerted them that I told them what was going on. I said, I'm the witness, an unnamed witness in a sexual assault case, and it's getting ugly, and they've sent a private detective. He's on campus in my dorm lobby right now.
That is bananas.
And so then my roommate.
And that didn't scare you off, apparently.
Girl.
Like, you doubled down.
Woo, I doubled down. And that's who I am today. Like, if you push me, I will double down, right? Which doesn't work to my husband's benefit very often. Just, But anyway, but then we have to talk about it, and then we rectify it, right? And I go, okay, I learned something about my doubling down. It's fine. So, yeah. There we are in the lobby. My roommate, God love her, right? She comes down with a tape recorder and a camera, like a Polaroid.
Wow.
Remember?
Yeah. Sitting there waving the picture for 5 minutes.
Totally, right? And she, because she had been working in press, like she was at the radio station, whatever. So she had like all these like things to, to be a journalist about, right? And so, yeah. I mean, we stuck that tape recorder right in his face, and she was taking pictures. And I started with, the Chicago police have been notified of your presence, and so has DePaul's security. What do you have to say to me?
You're like investigative journalists, but they came to you.
Right. Then that became evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still have that audio?
Oh, the Oldham County Police, for sure, they'll have that still. That's
okay.
That's in evidence. And then there's also when I confronted the perpetrator at a Captain D's restaurant.
That was something I wanted to ask, if you guys ever talked about any of this.
Yeah. So then it starts to come to a head, like actually how I was disclosed as the witness is the mother, the perpetrator's mother, my grandmother figure in my life, had called me. And how did she put it? I don't know. She said something like some kind of statement, like she was snaring me into, like, I think she said, "We found out it was you, that you're the unnamed witness." And da 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 da. She said something like that, and I just spoke right into it. And she goes, "Caught you, bitch." Yeah, something like that. And then that's what started the investigator. The investigator came shortly thereafter. And then, because they couldn't figure out who this witness was, right? Mm-hmm. Before that happened, and then back to the dinner where she took me out to dinner, she asked me if I would have dinner with him to talk about it. Because she was trying to brush it under the table, right? And I agreed. And at the time, my boyfriend's name was Scott at the time, and I asked Scott because my perpetrator was a gun fanatic. We do live in Kentucky, and my boyfriend Scott at the time was, I was like, "You just need to be somewhere else in the room." The detective, he gave me a tape recorder to wire myself, but he couldn't participate or be in Captain D's with me because that would have been entrapment. I had to do it all myself, right?
That's extremely courageous and brave and
unbelievable for a 7, 8. I was a baby. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we always underestimate the 17 and 18-year-olds, but when you've lived a hard scrabble life, like dealing with this crap on your own, which so many kids do, you build a resilience like nobody's business, and that is brilliant to use in life thereafter. So you can take that trauma and turn it into triumph 100%. And if there's somebody out there right now who's like really hurting from their pain, you turn that pain into power each and every time. I still do.
I love it.
Yeah. So there we are in Captain D's. And
what kind of food is Captain D's? I've never heard this restaurant.
Oh, really? You don't know? It's fish, fried fish, Todd.
Of course, Captain.
Yeah,
okay.
Like Long John Silver's. Oh, right, you're in Canada.
We have Long John Silver's.
Fish and chips.
Gotcha. Okay.
With the malted vinegar on the top, and then the best part are those little crispies at the bottom.
Nothing but batter and
grease. It's bad for you, right? But that was our look. I lived in I was middle class 100%, right? That was eating out. We loved it. That or the King's Table, which was like the banquet hall. We have something now called Golden Corral here in America.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
It wasn't. We didn't have that chain right growing up, but we had something a local restaurant that had a buffet, right? And it was called
Bonanza.
King's Table. Man, we were like into that, right? My family and I would be like, "Let's go eat at the King's Table or Captain D's." Those were the two restaurants only. So we're at the Captain D's, and I am grilling him. But he's being recorded. He has no idea that he's being recorded. And I'm like, I want to know. But he thinks that he has to do this so that his mom said, "You got to do this because this is getting nasty in your divorce." Okay. Mm-hmm. So I just asked, "Why do you do it to me?" And how, I heard through the grapevine that you're now diddling your 6-year-old niece. What the hell? Right? These are the questions that I asked him. And then to the question, because every victim wants to know why me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you what his answer was. And he was like, hunched over, looking down, like, no power position in his body. And he said, "I was lonely." Just take that for a moment. Because my boyfriend at the time was like, because he could overhear everything happening. He goes, "I don't mean to be offensive, but I really felt sorry for him." And if you're listening to this and you're a perpetrator, I want you to ask yourself, why are you so lonely that you need to hurt kids? And that's the thing to take to your therapist. That's the thing to take to mental health, because it's in this self-care process. If you think about my perpetrator, it was his mother. that perpetrated against him. Later found out that the father was missing from he'd always be in Haiti, right, doing construction work. He had another family in Haiti, is what was going on there. So then she's lonely, right? So then she takes it out on the kids, the two boys. And the cycle then goes and goes and goes and goes, right? So then why is she resorting to that type of behavior when she's lonely? What happened to her when she was a child?
Exactly, yeah.
So I also, as this all was coming out, I had the support of a therapist. Back in that day, that was like 1988. We had some really interesting therapy in 1988, which doesn't exist anymore to my knowledge. But I went to something called Parents United, something like that. My therapist was like, why don't you try some group therapy? So I went to this thing where they united victims and perpetrators all in one building on a weekly therapy group.
Wait,
yes.
Same meeting or just same building?
Both.
Oh.
So it was like a church.
Yeah.
And they would have in one room, like new victims who wanted to be in group therapy would go to this room. New perpetrators, just like a 12-step group, would go to that room. And then there would be a big room where it was victims and perpetrators together working through this to end this cycle.
Okay. And was that, do you think, beneficial, or do you think it's a good thing they don't have this kind of therapy anymore?
If it exists, I don't really know if it still exists, because when I was writing my memoir, I was looking for something called Parents United or whatever it is, right? And I couldn't find anything. Maybe it still exists in some form, or maybe it's been abolished because maybe therapists figured out it didn't work. I don't know. I can't answer that.
Okay.
I can only answer like my personal experience.
Sure.
Being in group therapy with other, it was a lot of incest survivors. I was the odd one that I was non-incest, right? But one might argue that it was because they were close family friends. I think that it probably did work for some perpetrators and some victims because, they got to be heard. And I think that if you suffer in silence, the cycle continues. And there's it's been years since I've researched why perpetrators do what they do. Some are born this way, and some people think that they're just bad seeds, right?
Good and evil.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. I think that it's nurture, nature, that old argument. I think it's people trying to adjust and adapt to their environment. If we look at these strange stories that come out where the father has hidden away his daughter in a basement for years, and then, those kinds of stories, like, well, what's going on there? Do we have a maladjusted male who's been rejected by women for some reason? All these stories, right? But by and large, the majority of these stories are incest in nature. And so what's happening, right, in that dynamic where that boundary is not, for that child, isn't protected? That's another show, other expert, right? I can't really speak to that. But for me personally, I do think that group experience I got to see that I wasn't alone. I got to hear other stories that, to this day, I still think about them. And I'll share one. There was one woman in our group therapy who shared that she had been molested by her father. And it's so important. I share this because at our in a macro conversation in America especially, we're talking about the rights of young children and young girls, and it's it's at risk, right? So just want everybody to put themselves in the shoes of this young girl. So she's being molested by her father and her grandfather, and she becomes pregnant at the age of 12.
Oh my God.
Yeah, in the Catholic Church, similar to me. That's why I probably remember it. And they don't believe in abortion because she's about to give birth to her brother, her uncle. What do you call that?
Yeah. Stepdad?
Okay? I mean, what do you call that?
Yikes. Yeah.
they exorcise her.
Oh, good.
That's what they do. They create an exorcism.
And it
That's
took.
what the Catholic Church is responsible. No, look,
Yeah.
I am not a religion hater. I love the fact that I was raised in such a biblical believing family. I have broad spiritual beliefs today. Lean probably more toward my great grandmother's Native American beliefs than I do anybody else's. However, I worked to reform the Catholic Church for a number of years after college in Chicago at a place called Call to Action. And the Catholics, the Catholic religion has just decades of history. And there's many things that do need to change about it. But there's also really wonderful things about the Catholic religion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not against exorcism. I don't know if they're ghosts or not. We need to have everything that we need to have. Right. When you're like in a spiritual crisis, you need to have everything that you can, right? I'm not down. Look, I watch Ghost Hunters. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's out there. But I will say that I don't know that that's an appropriate response to a 12-year-old girl who's being raped by her father and her grandfather.
Right. Exactly.
And I don't know if that child should be forced to give birth to her brother, uncle, or whatever that situation is. And somebody asked me, like, did she give birth? I was like, I actually don't remember what happened in that family. I just remember being in that group therapy, feeling connected, upset, all of the emotions with my sister that I could share these experiences with. You know what I mean?
I do. I've gone through addiction treatment, and it was there was no one-on-one therapy. It was all group therapy, and it was incredible. Like, and I don't mean like it wasn't like AA meetings, like we did that too, but it was like, yeah, you heard everybody's. Yeah. I mean, it was icky, but it was also like I've learned how to not judge because of it, because it's like, wow, everybody's going through something, and I'm looking at one of the dudes I would cross the street to avoid. I'm now like hugging and crying with them because I'm hearing the most horrific thing ever.
And I hope that we, from the whole conversation, I hope that people listening start to have a little more pause when they meet somebody who is raging. Because you're raging, the rage probably has nothing to do with you. The rage has everything to do with what they've experienced. And that's why I'm so committed to a trauma-informed society, when we can begin to understand, oh, that's maybe why they're acting that way. Not that I'm permissive. I don't want someone to hurt me like the creep in the backyard. I'm definitely going to get old school and be like, look, we need to protect ourselves and our property and all that. It's a very complex issue, right? But I do believe in having conversations that make a difference. I do believe in therapy, personal development, self-awareness. My biggest tip for people who have complex PTSD is EMDR. If you don't do any therapy, do EMDR.
Yeah, it was
good. Do you
good.
agree, Todd?
Yeah, it was really good. I've done all types of modalities. Like, it's just try everything and anything. Like, why not?
This is the first interview I've really gotten into the nitty gritty of what happened. And,
I'm honored.
Yeah. It's the first time that most people just deal with like, well, what do you recommend? Right. My dad, may he rest in peace, was really proud of me for bringing the perpetrator, to justice. It was really hard for my father when he found out what happened, but he did keep his rage under control because I was an adult by that point. My mother suffered for many years about the betrayal of this family. I think that sometimes she still suffers, but through my journey, she's healed. She said, she told me at first she was worried about the memoir and how the memoir would reflect on our family, but today she says, you're right. Michelle, you're writing. I'm learning. Send me every article that you write at Psychology Today, because I learn about everything. All right. So
nice.
There's hope.
As a parent, you would probably, I would anyway, like I'm a parent. If I did everything I could to protect my children and then something horrific still happened anyway, I mean, I can only imagine the amount of guilt that your parents felt,
Sure.
even though it was like, it just shit happens, right? It's like you can only control what you can control, and
Well, my
you
father
only
never
know what you
liked
know.
him. My father never liked him. And we had fights in the family between my mother and father because my father had that spidey sense.
Right.
Never liked him, right?
Other dudes can, I mean, I've been around other dudes where I'm like,
I would just say my only
"Ew."
advice is that families are groomed.
Right.
And if you're a parent, if you're a mother or a father, and you just have some kind of weird inclination about the individual, listen to it.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
You'll
Like,
be molested.
I mean, right, sorry. Sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant, what would be the worst that could happen if you were wrong and he's not
Right.
a
You'll be
perpetrator?
safe. That's right. That's right.
There's one less relationship. Right, I guess.
I'm so glad that we can laugh about such dark topics, Todd. It must be the reason why, one of my, my husband still doesn't understand why, he'll come home and I'm, binging on Special Victims Unit or Forensic Files or Justice Judy. And he's like, what's your deal with this trash TV? And I'm like, oh, it's justice. I love when the bad guy gets it,
Oh, yeah.
So
my son and I have been watching Mad Max movies, and it's like at the end of everyone, it's like, yay, he killed them. It's like, I love revenge movies too. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But,
Well, it's the human experience, right? We're trying to make sense of what we deal with in life. And so it's awesome.
Right. I say that, but also we were talking about having empathy for your perpetrators too,
Well, you do.
a bit.
You can.
But,
but people can still be held accountable.
Right. And
You
that's
don't have
the
to
thing.
approve of what they're doing, right?
Well, I can't remember where I heard this, but it was like trauma may not be your fault, but dealing with it is your responsibility. So you don't turn into a perpetrator. You don't start, unhealed people bleed all over other people, which then then their wounds, I mean, it's like you said, it's like a vicious cycle and it trickles down. And I mean, it's not your fault that you're a victim or you have a mental illness or you have anything else. But once you are self-aware, then it is your responsibility to take care of it.
One way that you can help yourself is when you're driving, don't do anything else. I notice that when I'm unsettled, I have a lot of distraction, right? So I'll try to do the music, I'll listen to a text, right? It's distracted driving. And that's not only dangerous and you can die from that, it's also an indication that you're unsettled for some reason. You're triggered or something's going on. Just focus on the drive. That's one easy way to meditate for busy people. Just focus on what you're doing without multitasking. One of the pieces that I learned from neurofeedback is that multitasking could be a symptom of something else, right? Some of us are forced to multitask in our jobs. I remember being a waitress in college. Not fun, right? Hard work.
I was a terrible waiter. I did it for 6 months, and I was like, people are like, dude, you are not good at this.
You gotta go. You gotta go. So, but yeah, I would just say, focus. If you're driving, drive. If you're doing a podcast. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, try to minimize that because the brain, the flitting part of that brain there's a reason why you do that.
Thank you so very, very much, Michelle. You were a lot of fun to talk to. I know it always sounds stupid when I say fun and we're talking about such terrible things, but you heard, she's a really lovely, sweet lady. So it was nice talking to her. And stay tuned for episode 2 to find out what happens in her story and just to talk more about mental health. Hey, I'd like to take this chance to thank Lolthal for leaving such a lovely review. It goes, more of this, please! ! Thank you for such a wonderful podcast. I was running out of my other shows, but luckily I stumbled upon this one. The host has a pleasant voice and funny reactions that keep heavy topics light while somehow still showing the perfect amount of respect to the topics. It's educational and an interesting listen. I'm looking forward to working my way through the catalog. Highly recommend! Thank you very, very much. Thank you for everyone that ever leaves reviews and ratings. It really does help podcasts. If you listen to other people's podcasts, make sure you do it for them as well, because it does help in charts and ratings and having people find you in the algorithm and all types of things. So, I'm very passionate about my guests and their stories and helping people with their stories. So why not have more people find it? Why deny people that are vulnerable enough to come onto this podcast to not help people? Why deny people that may be looking for a podcast like this not find it? Anyway, you get my point. So I have a bit of a dilemma. I can't decide if I just put part 2 next week or wait a few weeks before I put part 2 in. Make sure you follow the podcast to find out what I do. I do have other incredible guests lined up, as always, so stay tuned. Without further ado, please make your beds and take your meds. Bye.